Welcome everyone. Today we have our another new episode and we will discuss on cybersecurity. We have our world famous speaker, Mr. Rob Enderle, and Mr. David Smith. Mr. David Smith has birthday today. We want to wish you good luck and long live and prosper. Mr. Rob Enderle, what you want to discuss about cybersecurity?
Well, and happy birthday, David Smith. So cybersecurity. By way of background, I ran security for a division of IBM years ago, and I was also the lead security auditor for IBM Internal Audit for a couple years. And what you learn pretty quick with regard to cybersecurity is it's a mindset. The market sometimes works against that mindset. What I mean is to sell a security product, it's an insurance sale. So you overemphasize the problem and make it sound current in order to get the client to buy the underlying product. But there's very little done to match the product that you're buying to the problem that you're seeing. And the other thing that the industry really doesn't talk about is your biggest exposure is people. The predominant way somebody penetrates an organization isn't electronically. It's by figuring out a way to get somebody to give up their credentials and then using those credentials to gain access to the site. Now there are other ways to do it. The companies tend to be porous. Back when I started doing security, there was this concept of creating a walled fortress where you just kept everything that was bad out, and you had an operational zone where you had outward-facing technology that was, in theory, more secure than your inward-facing technology, in order to address your external customers. That, for the most part, has become obsolete as far as a concept. Now we recognize that companies are porous. People are bringing devices on site that have 4 and 5G connections. And so they're jumping any secure perimeter that you have. And the belief is now, we call it zero trust, that nothing really can be inherently trusted. Everything has to be validated. And this really comes from a lot of experience with just really weird stuff. Like, for instance, there was a casino in Las Vegas that got breached through their aquarium. Their aquarium used a pump that was connected and centrally managed that wasn't secure, and somebody spoofed the pump. And then, because that pump hadn't been identified and restricted as a pump, they came in as an authorized user and able to get access to a lot of transactional information and customer information the casino had that was supposed to be secure and protected. And one of the biggest breaches I covered years back was with a large company. And what had happened is over a period of time, a hostile attacker out of Eastern Europe, and most of the major attacks that are being reported are coming out either out of Asia or Eastern Europe. And the attackers worked inside the company without anybody's knowledge for a period of a year. And at the end of the year, they issued notices that went out to all the employees that looked like they came from management that said the company was sold, and the employees had to supply their banking information so that their final checks would get to them expeditiously. None of those notices went to managers or anybody that knew this was false. And after the employees had provided their information, and by the time somebody finally asked the manager whether this was real, the attackers were gone, and so was the information. It was one of the largest breaches in history, and it was also never reported. Which goes to one of the big problems we have with cybersecurity. Even though there are laws in place in many countries with regard to reporting a breach, companies still are not doing the reporting regularly. That they don't want to take the stock hit that often occurs when you report a breach. So we do get some reports, but just do recognize that the number of reports that we're seeing are far less than the number of breaches that are occurring, because there's a disincentive to report, and that disincentive is tied to the negative impact on the evaluation of the company that occurs when you have a major breach. Now, if you're really serious about cybersecurity, and I should point out that very few companies are as serious about cybersecurity as they should be. it starts with the employee training. And when you know somebody's not serious about cybersecurity, I mean, when it's pretty easy to determine it. Just ask when the employee was last went through training to avoid a phishing attack, or to make sure they don't say certain words over the phone, or make sure that they don't click on certain links. Some companies do penetration testing and do this, but nobody is regular. As far as I'm aware, nobody is doing it as regularly as should be done. And the reason is people that are trained to avoid the breach get sloppy, and just, you're working hard. You get a phone call. The person says they're your second line manager, or in some cases your CEO sounds like them. And with generative AI, you can now create voices that are identical to the person that they're trying to emulate. And so they call in and they tell you they're who they aren't. And then, because you're busy and you're rushed, you're not thinking about it. You provide them with a bunch of information they shouldn't have, and now your company's breached, and you're the cause, which means your job is going to be over. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when at this point. Because when we deal with security breach, we often shoot the people that were breached, rather than really looking at it analytically and then fixing the underlying problem, which, as I said, is often under training for the employees. Another issue you have to watch out for is escalation of privilege. This is when companies get lazy and they decide that everybody should have access to pretty much everything, because nobody wants to be bothered with the requests that come in for access. And so now you get some low-level person, say a receptionist, that should only have access to a minimal number of resources primarily associated with his or her job. But instead, because somebody was lazy, has access to everything on the planet, they get phished. They are not well protected and never have been. And the end result is the company's got a major breach because somebody had privileges they weren't supposed to have, and those privileges were taken by somebody else. And then we've got the Snowden problem that happened in the U.S., where you had an administrator that had excessive privileges themselves and instituted the breach themselves, and caused one of the most significant data breaches in United States history with regard to defense information. So there's a lot of methodology here, and most of it really doesn't have to do with technology. The technology provider that you want to pick is the one that understands your industry, understands the unique threats that you're under as an industry, and hopefully also understands your company and the unique defenses and exposures the company has to potential breach. And that way they can craft a defense that addresses those unique aspects of your firm and solves the problem. But very few security companies deal with this problem of employee training. It's typically seen as a job for HR, not a job for the security firm. And that problem is exacerbated by the fact that we typically don't blend physical security and electronic security under the same umbrella. So the people that are responsible for physical security, your security guards in your security department, and the people that are responsible for cybersecurity, which is typically IT and their security organization underneath, often don't talk to each other. And so you'll have issues where an employee is terminated, but their rights remain, and then those rights get abused. One of the biggest major problems I saw over the years was when an IT CIO actually was fired via text, and nobody removed his privileges, and he went in and deleted the company's files. I mean, deleted all of them, and being an IT guy, did so with great competence in that the data was not recoverable. Now, he was sued and put in jail, but the company was effectively out of business. And so it's those kinds of mistakes that plague an industry that just still doesn't take cybersecurity very seriously. On that serious note, and I'll end with this and pass over to David, is Microsoft historically did not take security seriously up through the 90s. And that created a huge problem for the industry, and a huge problem for them as well. By not taking security seriously and passing it over to firms like McAfee and Symantec, those firms then did a heck of a job disparaging Microsoft's products as part of their sales process. Made them sound far worse than they were, which finally motivated Microsoft to buy into security technology and get serious about security. But that foundational work that they did where they didn't take security seriously is still embedded in their products and still getting mitigated slowly over time, which means the platforms have been unusually unsecure as a result. IBM, in contrast, has always took security very seriously, going back to RACF and the mainframes, and that difference in approach, historical difference in approach, and again, Microsoft did close the gap over time, but the foundation is still somewhat flawed because they still build on older code. Has created a decades-long problem for them. So it's really important, particularly given the hostile environment that we're in, that you pick partners that take security seriously, because the one major security test I did while I was at IBM was to create a very secure site that couldn't be breached. And it was breached in 24 hours by simply going through an unsecure partner and using the trusted links to gain access to the secure site. So your security is only as strong as the weakest link, and your job is to make sure that your weakest link is stronger than anybody else's, so that attackers don't hit your company and hit another company instead. Because security isn't about being absolutely secure. It's being about not only being, but appearing to be more secure than the next most likely site, so attackers don't come after you and they go after the person who hasn't done the foundational work and isn't as secure. And by the way, it's both technology and appearance. It doesn't, if you're extremely secure but people believe you're not secure, they're going to keep trying until they get in. But if you appear to be secure, then people are likely not going to try to breach you, and it's the attempts that get you into trouble. And I'll pass to David. I've got some other thoughts, but I don't want to take up the entire morning.
Rob, you are so right with what you said, that everyone is being probed every day. You know, if you go and look in your router logs and things, you're going to see that you're probed every day. And it's really how strong you are in that. And like Rob, I have a fairly extensive background in cybersecurity, and having run the Futures program for almost a decade at one of the agencies in the United States that's tasked with cybersecurity, both defensively and offensively. So a little bit of a background there, but let me just pull back a second and give some context. Let me just start with maybe what the market size is, because that to me is very interesting. The cybersecurity market size in North America alone is at $261 billion this year, and is growing at a compound annual growth rate of almost 9%. And it is one that has tremendous changes going on in it. You know, cybersecurity at the base is protecting the critical systems and sensitive information from digital attacks. And the digital attacks, as Rob said, and I alluded to, can be physical in nature. The weakest links there. One of the things I used to love to tell people was, if I wanted to steal information from a company, and this was back when everything was done in data centers, I would go and buy the guy who works overnight backing up all the computers a case of beer, and get him to do me a backup in real time as he was doing the backup for everyone else. And they would never know what happened. But there's many different approaches there. So in 2020, the average cost of a data breach under cybersecurity was $3.86 million globally. In the United States, the cost of a data breach during that in 2020 was a little bit over 8.64 million. So you can see that the problems with cybersecurity are very high. A lot of what people target, is you looking there, is proprietary information for companies. For individuals, It's names, addresses, social security numbers, credit cards, driver's license, and things that they can go sell. And there's a lot of different tools that are coming in place to do this. But if I look at cybersecurity and try to separate in domains, kind of like where Rob was talking, is that I would first of all look at critical infrastructure security. That is place where you have to have superior cybersecurity because it is being attacked every day, and it includes it areas like national security, economics, health, public safety. And in the United States, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, has created some of the best security frameworks I've seen for dealing with this, while other agencies from National Security Agency, Homeland Security, and others have enhanced that. The second part of cybersecurity is network security. Then you have application security, cloud security, information protected or removed.
David, you're breaking out. We missed most of that entire sentence. You froze at the beginning and then just picked.
Okay.
You might want to repeat
Yeah,
that.
I'm still having Spectrum building new networks in my neighborhood, so I apologize. And even though I have fiber to the house, this is weird. There's information security, which is things like GDPR, protecting your privacy and others. That is part of it. End user education, very important part of cybersecurity, because as Rob said, is the end user is the weakest link in cybersecurity. Disaster recovery and business continuity is part of cybersecurity. And then you have storage security, mobile security, and that is a very important part of it. Most people think that the biggest threat for cybersecurity is hackers coming in from the outside. In reality, the biggest threat in cybersecurity is your inside threat. Rob mentioned some of the leaks in the past, and many of those are from inside people. Snowden was an inside cybersecurity incident that caused immeasurable harm. That the traitor, because of what he released, there were people killed as a result of his cybersecurity release. So these can be fairly severe. You also understand that most people think that our risks are well known. The reality is they're not. They're changing all the time, and it's a cat and mouse game. One of the forecasts I did for a group in the United States looked at when a new protection scheme came out, how long did it take for the bad guys to have a way to get around it? And the number surprised me. Usually, when a new protection scheme came out, a hack for it was already released before it officially came out. So it was a minus number. So most people, again, think that it's well known. It's not. And that their industry is safe, their platform they use is safe, and many of them not. Many people thought, I'm on a Mac and my Mac is safe from cyber attacks. No, that is not true. And it is very much so that way. The best approach when I work with cybersecurity is you have to deploy cybersecurity in layers. One system will not do that. The question I love to ask people is, here in North America, there are a little bit over 10,000 cybersecurity companies officially that I know of. God, why do we have so many? Because none of them can do it well. None of them can do everything. And with the explosive growth of artificial intelligence, it's going to get harder and harder. And you begin to see more endpoints. The explosive growth of Internet of Things give hackers another way to get into systems, like what Rob was talking about, with the weakest point in his system being a supplier. Oftentimes today, the weakest point in these systems are going to be sensors, Internet of Things devices coming back into it. But there's just so much in there, but the education is the key of helping users protect themselves. The amount of false information coming up. I know, for example, on some of my social media accounts, my account has been cloned by bad guys multiple times. And you have to be diligent in shutting those down, or they can cause a security breach down the road. We begin to see that is a way that can man in the middle attack with a man in the middle attack. And so there's just so much that we can keep on going here. You know, you see things like malware, ransomware, the social engineering, you see distributed denial of service attacks. You see something that is called advanced persistent threats. This is what happens when I can put a agent inside your networks and do things there. You see man in the middle attacks, and you see so many different approaches there. One of the goals, and this is what NIST and others are trying to drive towards, is something called a zero trust security environment. And what does that mean? Is that you build your systems that don't trust anybody. And most people try to protect the wall, and they like blacklist. So part of zero is only whitelist the people you want there and the systems you want there. So there's a lot of different ways there. But Sharif, I think that's a good first answer for me.
Mr. Rob, like here, example in Bangladesh, cybersecurity is very important. Specifically, like banking sector has a lot of threat for these things. Even there is a billions of dollar actually hacked by the hackers from the Central Bank of Bangladesh. I think already there is a movie from Hollywood so about this hacking. So what is your advice? Definitely to these sessions we can share with the ICT ministries as well as the central bank. What is your advice exactly what Bangladesh can do for solving these hacking related issues, especially for the banking industry?
Well, the areas where you're going to have a very high target profile of the targets that are most attractive are companies that either have money or information that the attackers want. And your attack range is everything from kids that have too much time on their hands, which is really where we kind of started out with regard to security problems. When I first was in school, most of the security problems we were talking about at the time were less about professional attackers and spies, though we had a few of those because we did have intellectual property theft. But most of the activity was kids that had too much time on their hands and were doing things that they shouldn't have been doing. That's changed over the years, and now our big concerns are large professional companies out of Asia and Eastern Europe who make their living doing this, and they're well staffed and well equipped, and they make money mostly right now on a ransomware, but they also make money out of selling stuff. I mean, out of selling the information that they steal. And criminal organizations, of course, tend to go after where the money is. And so banks are exposed to them. Governments the government organizations tend to go after assets, but those assets can include names. China has been actively trying to find the names, identities, and locations of Chinese anti-government Chinese activists, regardless of where they live, and doing so very aggressively, and actually sending their police out into countries to locate and capture and haul them off. We just had a major event in another country where they hauled off 30 Chinese nationals out of the country, and local law enforcement's having a cow about this because the Chinese law enforcement shouldn't be coming into a sovereign state and taking people. So it really depends on the nature of the threat, and the big thing to address though with any solution is you need to be able to capture attempts. Much of the problem in the last couple of decades with regard to security technology has been they only try to track and identify breaches. There's been a bit of a pivot to the AI, the machine learning, and AI programs that have been implemented by companies like BlackBerry, and that really try to look at both the internal behavior of the employees and flagging anything that seems different. In other words, trying to prevent the next Snowden event. If suddenly you have somebody that's never looked at HR files before and they're now suddenly looking at HR files, that's a flag and a block, because they may be doing something legitimate, but they may have been spoofed, and somebody may have their credentials and are moving it. So the idea is to stop it until you get another set of eyes on the event, so that you don't lose too much information, or in the bank's case, too much money. And that cuts the amount of the breach or the cost of the breach down to the point where it's not really profitable for the company doing the attack. And if you can make it unprofitable, then you can kill the industry. Another way to do that, of course, is if you are hit by a ransomware attack, is to not pay the ransom. I know that's hard for a lot of folks, but that's what funds the next attack. If nobody's making money with ransomware attacks, they're going to find another vector of attack. But as long as they're getting ransoms, it's now a funded industry, and you're just promoting the next attack. And be aware that after a ransomware attack, in particular, the code can still be in the system, and so you pay the money, you get access, and the next week they turn off access again and say, "Okay, we now want another $2 million, and we're now going to make this a weekly event." And it's problematic. Hey, whether you're talking about a kidnapping or you're talking about a data breach, paying a ransom is problematic for everybody else that comes after you. And the reason why you want to make sure that you're, for an external attack, you want to make sure that you're capturing attempts, is because you want to stop the attempts before they're successful. It kind of, man, there was an old Doctor Who episode that came to mind while I was thinking about this, and he gets captured in a dimension surrounded by an impenetrable wall, but he's given infinite time to penetrate the wall. And so every day he pounds on that wall a little bit. And after he's immortal. After millions upon millions of years, he finally makes it to the wall and breaks out. And that's why you want, and that's true, it doesn't matter how secure your site is. If somebody has an unlimited amount of time to pound on your defenses, and you're not doing anything to harden those defenses against those attacks, eventually that person's going to get through. And now we're moving into the era of artificial intelligence, and where you can automate all of this, where the attacks and really we're at the point where PIN numbers and stuff probably should be obsolete. But the underlying goal, of course, is making sure that after 2 or 3 times of the wrong PIN, the customer's locked out. That's still valid, except you're eventually going to have, because people don't remember their PINs. You eventually you incur a lot of extra costs of people calling in, being locked out of their account, either for bad passwords or PINs. So one of the things we really need to get away from is passwords and PIN numbers. The irony for me is, back in the 80s, IBM did a study and concluded that the ID and password approach to security was inherently unsecure and should be discontinued. Yet it is still the predominant way that we identify a user on a system, and we need to move beyond that. And there are a variety of ways to do that. Multi-factor authentication being one of them, though you'd have to make sure that your secondary authentication is is itself relatively secure, but it does make it far harder to breach. And in using other aspects, biometrics, to identify the user, though biometrics have their own downside as well, because once the biometric information is stolen, unlike a password, it can't be changed. And so there are concerns about using facial recognition and fingerprints, because once that information is compromised, you're totally screwed. And so you need multiple factors. You might have biometrics, and then you make sure that the person's coming in on a trusted device, a device they've already authenticated to the system. So you need both the user and that piece of hardware to authenticate them. And you can even go, when I say multi-factor, it doesn't have to be just two. You can have 3 or 4 factors that all apply to that individual that wouldn't be in place, including location. Some of the newer programs not only look at the hardware and biometrics, but also the location the person's in, because you suddenly know, well, somebody in California isn't suddenly calling in from India or someplace else to gain access, and it's an immediate flag that person is not who they say they are, because they're not coming in from the region in which they've been identified as being from. So the key aspect here is get rid of passwords, IDs, and PINs. They're inherently unsecure, at least alone. Move to some type of multi-factor authentication to validate the users. And number 3, make sure that you're monitoring for unusual activity inside the company against an internal attack, and you're tracking attempts to breach outside of the company so you can address the attempt before it's successful. When you're talking about electronic breaches in AI, any breach can be incredibly damaging, because an AI can move through the company far more quickly than a person ever could. And so you want to make sure you stop the attack before it's successful, rather than stopping the breach after the breach is occurred. And so those things should make the bank more secure without driving the users insane. I'll pass it in.
Come on, Rob. It's good to drive users insane. Rob is so right. There's so many different ways, and you want to have, like I said, security in layers. And Rob talked about some of the layers and how those layers can be used as part of the security system. Also, you begin to look at the different frameworks that can be used. And that home security is often different than business security, which is different than critical infrastructure, as I had said before. And the frequency, complexity, and actually the severity of cybersecurity attacks have increased tremendously over the years. And you see threat actors becoming more organized. You're seeing them using advanced tools. There are now websites, particularly in the dark web, where you can go in and buy the data they've breached. You can go in and have so many different things that are consequential impacts there. And this complexity is making the cybersecurity market dramatically grow. And there's a lot of research, a lot of opportunity for startups and others globally in this space. The newly trend towards more and more people working from home have contributed considerably to the complexity of the threats, the complexity of the systems needed to breach it. It was one thing, as Rob talked about earlier, about the walled garden and building the fortress around it. What's harder to do when your workforce is working from home with many different things, and securing hybrid working. They're an excellent way for ransomware to get in. Supply chain threats are huge. And as Rob said, it was one of his supply chains that breached his system before. And, moving to zero trust security models, moving to some of the more enhanced identification verification, away from just usernames and passwords, is tremendous. The lateral movement in networks has gotten so complex now as we see our relationships continue to expand, even at home, that it's going to be hard. I mentioned before the widespread adoption of Internet of Thing devices, to tremendously opening up new ones, and you see increasing government and regulatory increase on data localization, of privacy, of data governance within countries and others. That it's going to be a very complex market going forward in what you see. And last year, Gartner did a board of directors survey of companies, and 88% of all board members said cybersecurity is a business risk, but only 12% called it a technology risk. And so you see there are even gaps there where people, once again, are the critical factor. And the cyber risk can have operational, financial, reputation, strategic, I mean, tremendous consequences for everyone. The Russia invasion of Ukraine has actually increased dramatically the cybersecurity that you need as an organization. You see all the sides attacking each other. You're seeing threats to critical infrastructure. And you're seeing it's not just in the Ukraine, not just in Russia, but they are attacking worldwide. And they're increasingly looking at how to attack what is known as cyber physical systems. And in the past, those were very poorly protected. They need to become more protected as you go. And you need to begin to put in place a enterprise-wide view of how to implement cybersecurity and how to respond to it. And I like the comment over in the public comments: for nothing is hidden that will not be disclosed, nor is anything secret will not become known and come to light. Interesting quote, because corporations, governments, healthcare organizations, and others need to protect information. I want my information protected. So it's in our own best interest to go ahead and put very more robust approaches to cybersecurity in place. We've heard about quantum computers. Quantum computers are going to make encryption very hard to do for large players because they can break encryption keys very quickly. So we need to look at more robust approaches to it. NIST, National Security Agency, have come up with what they believe are quantum computing attack proof encryption keys. I want to see that really happen, but it's continually a cat and mouse game. One advance by protection, then the hackers break that, then you have to advance again. So security is not something I can say, well, I put security on my system last year. Well, it's out of date. The vulnerabilities are opening up all the time. So this is an ongoing thing that you have to be diligent about, and not something you can do just once. So Sharif, I hope that kind of helped with some of your questions there too.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Mr. Robin, as you know, that World Health Economy Forum, we are running some business incubations in Bangladesh and India. Besides that, we are closely working with Sheikh Hasina Institute of Frontier Technology. Recently, we forward the law and the policy of this university. We are planning to develop something like MIT in Bangladesh. So, what is your advice for this kind of industrial research-based university? How we can develop this kind of university? Definitely, our prime minister's gonna take care of this university. And what's your concluding remarks for today's session?
Well, right now, if you're setting up forward-looking engineering focused, both software and hardware focused mechanism, you're going to be heavily AI. You're going to embed AI in the process top to bottom. Because that's the wave we're in. So you're not going to build this using a traditional framework. You're going to build it with the idea that not only are the students going to be working on things with AI, whether we're talking about security or anything else, but they're going to be using AI as a tool to do research. In other words, they're not only going to be developing AI-based tools, they're going to be using AI heavily themselves to speed up the level of innovation and advancement that they're doing inside the school. And so it really is going to require that you sit down and think a bit about what that looks like, the way these students are going to collaborate, and recognize that the world going forward is probably going to have recurring issues where people are going to need to be remote and not come into school, either because of their location, because you're going to want to recruit people based on their talent, not necessarily based on their proximity. And we can do that now. We've got the tools. And also because you really want to make sure that the school can stand in the face of future pandemic events, weather events, and wars. And so you're going to design with that in mind. Highly redundant, AI built throughout the curriculum, and rather than highlighting AI as something that can't be allowed because it's a cheat, instead be creating people that are expert at using AI to advance and enhance their own productivity, and using it in terms of not only creating future AIs, but in understanding the underlying technology and advancing it going forward. Let me reword that. I wish I had like 24 hours to think that question before you ask it. So the structure would be a largely virtual campus with a physical presence. And AI tools would be available, and you'd be selecting students based on their historic use of new tools and their willingness to accept new methods. And by the way, with regard to the professors, same kind of thing. You do not want fixed focus professors. You want professors that are willing to consider new ideas. David, if you're running something in the background, it's coming through on your microphone. I don't know if that was you or Sharif, but that was a bleed through. So the idea would be a campus that would be unlike any other. Where you're really thinking about the idea of satellites, of people being able to get together and collaborate wherever they are, and either physically or virtually, with no stigma attached to being remote, and then being a showcase of how to use AI in terms of creating a curriculum, and how students would use it in terms of how they advance their studies. But AI is going to be part of everything. It's already part of security, heavily part of security, and going forward, particularly the other technology, of course, you're going to be embracing because of timing, is quantum technology, because there's no way to really separate the two now. Quantum technology will be layered on AI technology and will make a huge difference going forward. And because you're thinking about the school as how it will address the future and placing Bangladesh on the map with regard to development, you need to build it with these tools in mind, and these tools have to be available to use for both the students and the instructors have to be selected based on their willingness to use the tools to develop curriculum and to deliver content. And so you're probably going to want to pull a bunch of people from industry, because you're not going to find a lot of people like that are currently in academia, and then help construct it. I would look at places that already have advanced research labs. IBM has advanced research labs. Intel has advanced labs that work with schools. In fact, they've been heavily embedded in schools for some time. Imagine there are industries that exist in Bangladesh that are also already embedded with schools, but are frustrated with what they're seeing with existing institutions, and would have insights of with regard to what it is they would need to create a collaborative environment between industry and this educational institution, so that the stuff that's being created has a home in one of the companies that are sponsoring, collaborating with, and working with the school going forward. Because you need all of those elements in order to not only fund the school, but to make sure the students are being trained in things that they can immediately apply when they leave school to the industries and have opportunities, intern opportunities with the companies that are collaborating with the overall effort. And so a lot of blending between the students in terms of their academic work and research and their ability to apprentice and be able to work in industry at the same time to gain practical knowledge in terms of how the technology needs to be applied and placed. And so the research actually goes someplace and has some output in terms of a material product that eventually can be sold. And that then provides revenue opportunities for the school itself, lowering overall tuition and lowering the overall load on the state in order to fund the results. So the more you get industry cooperating and collaborating in the effort, the lower the cost to the individual and the lower the cost to government for the result, and the higher the benefit, because that collaboration has a higher probability of creating products and opportunities that make the companies that are collaborating more successful. And so you get kind of an ecosystem that's pulling itself up kind of from its own bootstraps. And that would be how I would advise doing. But I think the collaboration should be between forward-looking academics that are willing to look at different ideas and different ways of teaching and delivering content, but understand and have experience in doing it. And then industry in terms of the best use of the technology and addressing the frustrations your local industries have working with existing educational systems, so that the new institution hits the ground running and is better able to do the job than existing institutions can or do, and is farther along the evolution of technology, both in use and development, so that it's not trying to constantly catch up with everybody else. It's cutting its own path and has a chance of being uniquely successful in the world market, not just in Bangladesh. So that's how I would do it off the top of my head. But had I been given a lot more time to think about that question, I might have given a bit different answer. Off to David. Closing remark.
Mr. David Smith.
You're muted.
Sharif, any place you want me to focus? Or I'll just go ahead and do closing remarks then. Sharif, as Rob and I both said, cybersecurity is vitally important, tremendously complex, and is something that you have to continually to work on and adapt to the changing threat environments. People, huge part of cybersecurity risk, and deliberate action needs to be taken around them. If I was kind of looking with my crystal ball at the future of cybersecurity, the networks are growing, the infrastructure is growing, the architectural complexity of this all is getting tremendously accelerated. It creates a greater number of variety of connections, which can be the targets of cybersecurity attacks. And you're seeing increasing sophistication of the people who are doing the attacks. You're seeing young kids who are mounting cybersecurity attacks that are still in elementary school because of the tools that are out there. Also, we have very poor threat sensing. Oftentimes, the bad guys are in the networks before you ever know it in there. There's tremendous third-party vulnerabilities, the supply chain and others. People going to conferences and picking up USB sticks and then going and putting them in systems without understanding that there can be a threat environment on that. Tremendously bad. At one of my companies, we ran security network operating centers for states. We could use not only white hat hacking, but we could use some black hat at times. And for one state agency who was particularly challenging for us, we actually bought some wireless mice and put a little threat environment in the wireless receivers so that we could compromise the system. And it worked unbelievably well. And you have to understand that threat environment is very complex and very real. particularly the third party. Cybersecurity needs to be part of any new application, any new platform, any new cloud, anything you deploy needs to have a cybersecurity element to it. And like I said, we're seeing now this growing concept of cyber physical systems where everything now is beginning to interact with the physical world. We're seeing the robots, we're seeing the AR, VR, we're seeing all these other things. We're seeing smart buildings, smart cities. All of these are going to be very vulnerable to us. And you really need to take them into account, put them in place, develop teams to support you, and understand that this is the threat moving forward. Sharif, I could talk about cybersecurity for the rest of the day, but I think this is probably a good point for me to end. Mark?
Yeah, like I said,
Mr. Martley,
go ahead.
yeah, we are in.
I didn't hear what you said, Sharif. What did you say, Sharif?
We're in
Martley,
closing remarks.
Yeah.
We were just about to drop off the air.
No problem at
We are
all.
in
Like I
closing
said,
remarks.
no problem. So I'll give an opening and a closing since I just popped in and all along those lines. But I know that even in the artistic community, and I know that David can relate to that as well, that cybersecurity is something that a number of nonprofits, a number of organizations, even in the art world, have been paying attention to, because as has been stated, there is a need for security even in these kind of public buildings and all along those spaces. But a lot of times you don't know 100% what malicious actors may be doing in that space, because I do know that even in the arts world, whether it is my local center that I work at, the Hayti Heritage Center, or whether it is some of our bigger institutions like the DPAC, which is a major performing arts center in the Southeast, even though it's based here in Durham, or even in PNC, where the Hurricanes play and a number of other people play there as well. And of course, there have been major concerts that cybersecurity and making sure that you have security involved is very much a integral part of their new agenda and the new things that they're doing. But with the added hybrid things that are going on, and you wanting to increase your audience and in that space, you also want to make sure that you are very secure in that space as well. And I know that that has been a concern, even when people have been seeing that they can remotely control everything from their entrance to their video outtakes and a number of other things. But then you want to make sure that you are doing that in such a way that is efficient, but also very safe as well. And I'm sure that even David and Rob would agree with that. But that is a conversation that many performance halls are having, whether it is a small one or a big one like Carnegie Hall, because there are new elements that have been added in this new era that we are living in, where cybersecurity is important for everybody, including our school systems, because a number of school systems have had cyber threats on them as well, because of the different things that they are bringing in, even in that teleeducation and even in our health, because telehealth has been very big as well. So there are a number of cybersecurity threats that are newer to society because of what went on with the pandemic and a number of other things as well. So that's just kind of my own reflections on the importance of cybersecurity, even within the different sectors and all along those lines. And I think David and Rob would agree with me on that.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining today's sessions. I request all of our audience, please share our content as much as possible. Thank you. Bye-bye and take care.